My parents spoiled my twin sister so badly they spent my wedding fund on her, so I went no contact after turning down my mom's greedy request. You know, sometimes I look back at my life and just think, wow. Can you imagine being told your entire life that you were a burden, an unwanted twin, while your sister got all the love? Now, picture that same family years later calling you out of the blue, not to apologize, but to demand you bail them out of a crisis. Would you do it? Or would you finally cut them off for good? Because that's my story. And it all started with Allison. I'm 23 years old, and for as long as I can remember, things have been complicated with my twin sister, Allison. Actually, complicated is a massive understatement. We're not even on speaking terms. And neither am I with my parents. For the last 2 years, I've kept my distance, and they hadn't bothered to reach out. Not until very recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me, and by some unspoken family rule, that made her the automatic golden child. She was always the favorite. Always. My parents, you see, only ever planned for one kid. That's what they could afford, what they wanted. But then, surprise. They found out mom was having twins, and by then it was too late to do anything about it. Or so they claimed. I didn't even know this until I was in high school. My drunk uncle at a Thanksgiving party spilled the beans. Just imagine all these years pouring my heart and soul into trying to win their affection, only to find out I was essentially an accident, a burden they never wanted. That day, something in me just broke. I stopped trying. They'd done the most natural thing in the world, given birth to 2 children, and then decided only one of them deserved their love. That one obviously was Allison. Not me. From the time we were little, the sibling rivalry between Allison and me was insane. Everything she did, I tried to do better. Not because I inherently wanted to, but because I was desperate. Desperate to impress our parents, to get just a sliver of the attention Allison received so effortlessly. But it only ever backfired. They just seemed to hate me more for outdoing their precious golden child. And here's the kicker. Allison wasn't even truly interested in being better than me. She just wanted validation. So, she'd pretend she cared about this constant competition, and then she'd manipulate everyone around her into believing I was hurting her. She was good at it, really good. She'd make people believe she felt genuinely hurt when I achieved something, which always led to others validating her feelings and, of course, putting me down to make her feel better. These people included my parents, some relatives, and even a few friends from high school. So, the twisted outcome? I ended up with great grades, a ton of co-curricular achievements, and a strong drive to be independent. Allison. She got all the attention, the validation, the sympathy, because I was clearly the bad guy for making her feel less. Looking back, I wouldn't trade my achievements for anything. But oh, how I wished I could rub it in their faces more back then. Then 2 years ago we turned 21. We had both graduated college. Allison had gone to a regular state school, nothing special. But I graduated from one of the top business schools in the state. And not only that, I was the valedictorian. I even got a scholarship, which meant my parents saved a huge chunk of money on my education. Call me crazy, but I actually expected them to be proud. Happy even? They weren't. They barely acknowledged it. Their focus was entirely on Allison, who had just barely scraped by. We both moved back home for a bit. While I was already working an internship at a top firm, Allison was still floundering, getting rejected left and right. My parents cared more about her struggles than my success. They didn't even bother to congratulate me. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was still so deeply disappointed. I tried to hide it, mostly because I was still living under their roof and hadn't saved enough to move out. I told myself to just keep quiet. But after our 21st birthday, I just couldn't anymore. I expected something, anything for our big birthday. But the day before, I discovered everyone had left. Home alone. All that remained was a note. A note telling me they were heading to the beach with Allison and her friends, and they'd be back in a couple of days. My heart absolutely shattered when I read that. They'd taken Allison and her friends on a beach trip, and all I got was a happy birthday note and a $50 gift card. So many things about my childhood had been unfair, but that was it. That was where I drew the line. It was so profoundly disappointing, so utterly heartless. In that moment, I made a decision. I was moving out that day and I was never looking back. I had a couple of friends who were kind enough to let me crash with them until I found my own place. It wouldn't take long. My firm was likely going to hire me after the internship. So I just needed a temporary roof. I packed my stuff, moved in with a friend, and didn't tell my parents or Allison a single thing. And I haven't looked back since. You know what's even more telling? They didn't miss me. Not enough to ask me to come back anyway. They did call me on my birthday the day after I moved out, but it wasn't to wish me well. They wanted to tell me they'd be back soon and that I should probably get a plumber to fix a leaky tap. I'm not living at home anymore, I told them, my voice flat, expecting some kind of reaction. Any reaction. But there was nothing. My parents sounded perfectly fine with it. Allison didn't care. And that was it. That was the last proper conversation I had with my family. For 2 years I didn't see them, didn't hear from them. I'd occasionally get updates about Allison through mutual friends, like how she got married a few months ago to some businessman almost 10 years older, and was now living it up in California. But my parents? Nothing. And they knew nothing about me. I worked my butt off. Art. And now, I have my own place. It's not a mansion, but it's a beautiful apartment in a great neighborhood. The rent is affordable with my income, which is a huge accomplishment for someone my age. I'm happy with how my life has turned out, and I'd finally managed to push them out of my head. Or so I thought. 2 days ago my uncle called. He told me I had to visit my parents fast. They'd been in a really bad car crash and wanted to see me. Of course I rushed to the hospital. Despite everything, I'm not heartless. When I got there, I found out they'd already been in the hospital for a couple of days, healing from their serious injuries. A truck had hit their car. They survived, but it was bad. And here's where it gets infuriating. They didn't have health insurance. My dad, in his infinite wisdom, always believed that if we just took care of ourselves, we wouldn't need a hospital. One of the most idiotic takes I've ever heard. They had contacted my sister first. Allison. The golden child. And she told them she wasn't coming back. And she certainly wasn't going to help them financially. Apparently, it was tacky for our parents to ask for financial help from her rich husband so soon after their wedding. She didn't want to seem like a gold digger to him. And she couldn't fly back, she said, because she couldn't abandon her home and her 2 kids. 2 kids, mind you, who weren't even hers. They were her husband's from a previous marriage. But she was too busy playing happy family with her new husband's family to come see her own parents, lying injured in a hospital bed after a terrible car accident. Honestly, it wouldn't have mattered if she wanted to help. From what I heard, if her husband wasn't there for her, she wouldn't have been able to afford even the flight tickets back home, seeing as she's just a stay-at-home mom now to kids who aren't even her own. So much for being the favorite daughter, the golden child, huh? I still couldn't believe they hadn't even had the decency to call me first. But it got even more infuriating when my uncle dropped the bombshell. My parents now wanted me to cover their medical expenses. It was a huge amount, something that would take me a long time to recover from financially. I didn't want to spend so much, especially on people who never cared for me, who never showed me any love my entire life. They argued that they had other family who could take care of them, and if I didn't pay, someone else would. But they said it would be more humiliating for them to take money from others. And they'd definitely have to return it a lot sooner than they would have had to return it to me. Can you believe the manipulation? They even promised I'd have the money back in no time. I was in a tough spot. I could humiliate my parents by refusing to pay their bills and truly look out for myself. Or I could pay for them, lose out on my own hard-earned money, and then wait indefinitely for them to return it. To be totally honest, I wasn't inclined to pay for them at all. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Things had been bad for as long as I could remember. They were as good as strangers to me. So why should I help them? But then a nagging voice whispered, wouldn't that make me just as bad as Allison? That thought, it sucked. So for a while I wrestled with it. I thought about the comments people might make about being the good daughter or not. But after reading some incredibly insightful advice, I realized something profound. I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. She didn't help, so I felt this twisted need to step up and prove I was the better daughter. What a ridiculous thought. I guess that competitive streak is just ingrained in me now, no matter how hard I try to shake it. My parents financially are okay. Not rich, not poor. Dad's a sales head, mom's in HR. Their combined income is enough for them, especially since they don't have to support Allison or me anymore. We didn't worry about money growing up. So why couldn't they pay their own bills? The whole "will pay you back sooner than others" line was so flimsy. They wouldn't tell me why. It was time to end this. I told my parents I wouldn't be covering their expenses. They'd been calling me for a week, and I finally decided I couldn't just ignore them until they were out of the hospital. So I answered. I told them calmly that I'd thought about it and I didn't feel the need to help. As expected, they didn't take it well. My mom totally tore into me, yelling as loudly as she could with her broken ribs. Ungrateful, she screamed. How could you? The usual. My dad just delivered the final blow. You are no longer our daughter, he said before hanging up after Mom was done. And you know what? It didn't hurt. Not the way I thought it would. Because truly I hadn't been their daughter for a really long time. I couldn't even remember the last time I felt loved by them. They hadn't spoken to me on purpose for 2 years, just because I'd moved out after they'd ignored me on a crucial birthday. So really, I never had parents anyway. This just made it official. It didn't make a big difference to me. My uncle, of course, called me after to give me another earful. But I hung up after a few seconds. I didn't need that. They could think whatever they wanted about me, it simply didn't matter anymore. Then came the text from my uncle. He was trying to guilt-trip me, telling me they had to scramble to get money from other family members. And this is where the truth finally spilled out. Since it had come to this, he explained, my parents had decided to use the money from the fund they'd set aside for our weddings. Wait, our weddings? They'd already blown more than half of that fund on Allison's wedding, and whatever little money was left, they'd spent on a Europe trip. That's why they had barely any savings left. That's why they couldn't pay for themselves. Mystery solved. My uncle had obviously told me everything to make me feel bad, to make me regret my decision. But all it made me feel was a profound sense of relief. Relief that I hadn't spent my hard-earned money on their bills. They had spent their own savings irresponsibly, and that was not my fault. They're not having insurance because of their own delusional beliefs? Also not my fault. They could borrow money from relatives or go to hell. I wasn't giving them anything. They weren't entitled to anything of mine anymore. Not my time and definitely not my money. Then, something truly bizarre happened just a couple of hours ago. Allison showed up at my apartment. I was shocked. Firstly, I didn't think she'd even know where I lived, but apparently an old high school friend told her the neighborhood and she asked around. A lot of effort for her to undertake just to see me. She looked different. More refined, more sophisticated, I guess. She carried herself differently, talked in a more ladylike way, dressed impeccably, wore expensive jewelry. For a moment, I felt like I wasn't even talking to Allison. But then she opened her mouth. And one thing hadn't changed, her core self. You can't put makeup on your heart. Her personality and beliefs definitely hadn't undergone any renovation. I let her in curious. After some small talk, mostly her bragging, unprompted, about her fabulous life. As a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers, married to a wealthy guy with nothing to worry about except her cuticles, I just politely nodded, waiting for her to get to the damn point. She even started advising me to become a traditional housewife. 15 agonizing minutes later, she finally did. She'd come back, she said, because our parents had been begging her to visit after the accident. They didn't want her money, just her presence. So, after 2 weeks, she'd finally made the trip. And she figured she'd come see me too so we could bury the hatchet. So far so good, right? Then she started complaining. Complaining about how needy our parents were, how they were being disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to abandon her 2 babies with their nanny just to visit, and how she hated our parents for making her choose between them and her kids. I still can't make sense of why she keeps referring to them as her kids, when they're obviously not biologically hers. She told me so much about her marriage even though I hadn't asked. And from what I gathered, her husband probably only married her to increase his chances of getting partial custody of his kids. He'd been in a nasty custody battle, and his ex-wife was using his demanding business schedule against him. But then he announced he was engaged, getting married, and that suddenly tilted the scales in his favor. Allison told me all of this, bragging about how she had saved those kids. But all I heard was that her husband had used her. They hadn't even known each other for a year when he asked her to marry him. It was painfully clear he wasn't in love with her. Nobody falls in love that quickly, especially after a divorce. But she seemed blissfully unaware. Or maybe she knew but was willing to look past it because of the huge bank balance. Willing to be a glorified nanny to her husband's kids. And on top of all that, she was mad at her own parents for wanting her by their side after a terrible accident. Because that was somehow taking away from her time with her new family, a husband who probably didn't love her, and 2 kids who weren't related to her and were doing just fine with their nanny. If the word ungrateful ever needed a face, it would be Allison's. I'm no fan of my parents, but honestly, when she was going on about them being needy, I couldn't believe this was the girl they'd chosen over me again and again. Then she finally got to the real point of her visit. She was leaving in 2 days. She'd promised Mom and Dad she'd stay for at least a month, but she was bored of listening to them recount the accident for the 10th time. She needed to get back home. So, she wanted me to reconcile with them. To take her place. Because she didn't want to feel the guilt of abandoning her parents when they needed her. She had no idea they'd cut me off again for refusing to help with the bills, probably because they never even talk about me. Allison was there for sympathy, for me to pick up her emotional slack. It was classic Allison manipulation, but I knew it all too well. I didn't fall for it. I also had no intention of telling her any of this while she was in my apartment, which would inevitably lead to a fight. So I just told her I'd try, knowing full well I wouldn't. She left after telling me to keep in touch, but we both know she doesn't mean it. I was actually glad to see her go. Not only was she a terrible, narcissistic person, but she was also incredibly boring to talk to. I could barely get a word in while she droned on about her uninteresting life in California. It basically revolved around parties, her stepchildren, and her husband. She thinks she's living the life, but I thought it was truly sad. Her husband clearly doesn't love her, and her kids probably spend half their time with their bio mom. But you know what? That's the life she chose for herself. And the life I choose for myself is going to be one that is far, far away from my family. They are truly undeserving of even a quarter of my attention or sympathy. If anything, today taught me that I've been right to distance myself from my parents and my sister. I do not want to be part of these people's lives. They are incredibly selfish and cruel, and I highly doubt they're even capable of thinking of anyone apart from themselves, especially Allison. I'm honestly ashamed I'm even related to them. At least now, I've been able to cut ties with all of them for good. I blocked Allison as soon as she left, and my parents and other relatives have been blocked for days already. So, I think I'm safe from being troubled by my family for at least the foreseeable future. I'll pray they don't try to get back in touch with me after this either, because I'm way, way better off without them. Have you ever had to make such a difficult decision about family? What would you have done in my place? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.